Right, so let's try this puzzle thing again, and then hopefully we should be able to actually continue the rest of Kelp Forest, and hopefully we'll try to get out of this little gloomy place as far as I'm aware. Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sonic the Hedgehog here, and I'm back for some more of yet again for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom for the PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, and of course Xbox. So, last time we have managed to able to start to exploring around most people's least favorite world in this game, which appears to be of course Kelp Forest, as you guys should already know. And today for this episode, we might potentially try to able to actually just wrap things up, journey forms of every single part in Kelp Forest, and eventually we'll try to able to actually just, well, not to mention trying to able to actually get ourselves the next quite a few collectibles like Patrick's sock, or even especially noticeable with the final power crystal for Barnacle Boy, and also same applies to, what else, Golden Spatula. So either way though, hopefully we'll get this thing to it and get it down and over with before we move on to God knows what the next thing we're about to be doing. So as you can probably tell from this point is the fact that today's day is, of course, I want to say today it is the 29th of well, June today, in this case in 2020, and yeah, we are literally trying to expect about the fact that we've almost going to be finishing up with this particular game at some point by the end of June, but because of how the fact that since after all that recently Daffy Duck and Jewel are both almost going to be wrap things up with the forms of Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games, until eventually those two will manage to finish up with that Let's Play and terrain at some point tomorrow. Because after all, they have pretty much shown you guys basically everything, especially noticeable with, of course, all of the rifle battles basically and stuff like that for that specific little knowledge and stuff like that. And potentially speaking, is the fact that eventually until next month, despite the actual Tokyo 2020 Olympics, has been postponed recently, as you guys should know, due to the forms of the actual stupid coronavirus pandemic and stuff like that. But hopefully we're able to be dealing with the next latest Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games installment or something. Most notably with, of course, Tokyo 2020 for the Nintendo Switch. So hopefully though, it won't be able to actually take that a long time to able to actually get a huge, you know, quite a few abundance of stuff I like to mention. I have no idea why Dre's saying things a little bit rubbish today, just because there's not much else I can talk about this, apart from the fact that, well, obviously we're getting close towards the end of June before we move on to, potentially speaking, the halfway point of well, let's just say the halfway portion of 2020 so far. Despite the beginning, it might not be so bad, but it wasn't until in March it just gets really rough around the edges, as you guys should know. But anyways, let's go ahead and activate that particular Tiki stone right here, and specifically, not only do we need to get ourselves the, of course, the final power crystal, so that way we can able to actually deliver that to Barnacle Boy, but also, get this, we might able to actually potentially actually access to this next area of Kelp Forest. So hopefully we would be able to actually consider this to be, well, a one and done kind of scenario or something. Again, I must admit that I do apologize with the actual commentary of certain things like this, just because it has been about quite a few days since I actually coming back to this. And plus also, I'm recently starting myself my brand new, or potentially speaking, we're starting on new Let's Play, which is of course the next Mario Kart game, which appears to be, well, Mario Kart Super Circuit, which at this point, I'm actually doing quite well, but I'll discuss more about it until likely for a later time for the sake of time. And yeah, you probably get the idea. And let's go ahead and switch over to SpongeBob, because I'm pretty sure he's the only mandatory one able to do all that. Or, potentially speaking, that's, oh yeah, we can able to actually use that. So yeah, that's pretty handy. And plus, because we need to switch back over to SpongeBob right here, that's only because it's pretty obvious, is the fact that we, you know, with that little foot the switch thing that we always have to stand on in order to able to actually activate certain switches, as you can see, for that little gate and stuff like that. Well, we're able to actually utilize the actual bubble missile control, and that way we would be able to actually activate the switch. So, even though despite the fact that I was so close to able to actually activate on the first attempt, but as long as you were able to be super precise with the actual analog stick movements and stuff like that, then you should be able to not only actually access this next part of the Kelp Forest, but also we get ourselves another golden spatula. So no need to able to actually just to go ahead and deal with a lot of backtracking moments here and there, which it will be kind of a good thing. And we're now on to 70 of those golden spatulas so far. And let's go ahead and go back into Power Crystal Clear, which meaning about the fact that we need to talk to Barnacle Boy at least. So, yeah, that's how it goes basically. Bye now.
Barnacle Boy, I think I found all your crystals. Now I can see your secret superpower.
All right, stand back. Oh boy. There.
What happened?
I gained the power to trim my nose hairs at super speed.
Incredible.
Yeah, I guess so. Well then, I need to return to the normal air and get back to work. But here, take this golden spatula and go away.
Of course, Barnacle Boy. I'm always happy to lend my services to my favorite superhero. If you ever run into trouble again, let me know.
Yeah, sure, kid. Thanks. And goodbye.
Alright, so let's go ahead and get ourselves another golden spatula. So that way we got to, well, I would say we've managed to get up to 71 of those golden spatulas so far. So yeah, not too shabby. And I think we are basically done in this particular cave section at this point. So now let's go ahead and move on to, probably, potentially speaking, the next section in the forms of Kelp Forest. So hopefully, won't give us that much trouble and stuff like that. Well, despite the fact that we might as well able to come across into semi-blind stuff, as you guys should already know. But regardless of everything else though, I think we actually doing not too bad. But just a bit slow at the beginning, probably because it was quite newbie to me when it comes to knowing every single environment of this though, but I digress. So there's another golden spatula there.
Hi, Mermaid Man. What are you doing here?
Oh, hello, Kyle. I was trying to find some of our missing energy crystals when I came across this vine. In my younger days, I held the all-time speed record for vine sliding. You should try it. What a hoot! And if you can beat my best time, I'll give you another of these gold spatulas.
Well, I am a bit busy with all these robots, but sure, why not? It does look like fun.
Try not to fall off.
Alright, so looks like we're now going to be exploring around on the Kelp Vine, and this is where we're going to be meeting up with Mermaid Man, and able to accept the fact that we're going to be doing with, once again, another time challenge. Except a noticeable difference this time around though, this one might be potentially be one of the hardest of the time challenges in my opinion. Probably because, well, for one noticeable thing, there's going to be a lot of sharp curves that you have to able to actually slightly tilt the analog stick for. And second is the fact that sometimes I swear my timing of my jumps was a little bit too awkward most of the time. But as long as you would get the hang of this though, it won't be so hard. But either way though, we'll point it out whenever we get onto the later portion of this throughout. So yeah, I'm just, for whatever reason, I'm always having a hard time trying to able to actually tilt the analog stick just onto that specific curve alone. But I digress. So not much else has been going on, I'm afraid, in terms of the forms of this particular day as far as I'm concerned. But I will say this though, is the fact that I'm pretty sure that Duffy and Jewel has already mentioned about the forms of the PlayStation 5 reveal event, which I'm sure enough those two has already mentioned about that since during the forms of in the rifle battle videos and stuff like that. Specifically, you know, with all the boss battles in, well, to be more specifically, rifle matches and stuff like that. Journey forms of ever since in Journey forms have been Thursday the 25th or something. So even then though, that's is actually pretty interesting to say the least though. But even then though, we'll say this again, we're probably not going to get the PlayStation 5 day one, probably because of the actual, depending on the launch games lineup, as usually becomes like a mixed bag of any sorts, and B, because, well, it might be pretty expensive at the time. So even then though, we'll just see what happens whenever that thing is about to be releasing. So even then though, probably due to at some point by the end of the year. So even then though, although I'm sure enough the actual specific date, that I'm sure enough that Devi and Jewel has already mentioned about that several times, since, you know, Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games. I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of about it anyway. And I suppose another thing I should probably mention about this too is that, well, recently we got ourselves even more photos of Super Nintendo World Amusement Park in Japan, and it looks like it's going to be super impressive. Like, I am so looking forward to able to see how that particular theme park is actually going to be worked out. Probably my most highly anticipated things of the whole entire year, despite with the forms of ups and downs. Well, specifically for this year, which I think is most common thing of them all, is of course the actual pandemic coronavirus situation, plus with the forms of the actual pure chaos in America, and even with I jumped it too early! Dang it. I have to go all the way back, aren't I? And yes, just like in the forms of in the Sand Mountain world, these particular segment right here does manage to contain a checkpoint that's usually at the middle portion of the level, if I assuming for this correctly. So either way, I did it again. What is going on with me with my jumps? What is going on with my jumps in this throughout? Oh well. But then again though, if you somehow failed the time challenge, well, assuming if you accidentally activate that particular checkpoint, then much like how it does in Sand Mountain, that you can able to actually re-select the same mission you really want to go through. So even then though, super handy and super useful at the same time, assuming if you're able to actually don't come across into a lot of, you know, trial and error like I just did right there. But either way though, it will still took you a lot of practice, assuming if you're able to time your jumps or what have you, even though for whatever reason my jumps won't even seem to come out of it most of the time right here. But to be honest with you guys, I don't think I can able to actually cut down most of the actual failure attempts or anything like that, because, well, then again, I'm only just going to show you guys the actual grinding of those shiny objects, as you're going to be seeing me constantly collecting, assuming if I keep on falling off the actual slide sections most of the time. But either way though, it's nothing else to be like bothering me as much though. But either way though, that's how it goes basically. But then again, it's actually super easy to able to actually just to farm, even like, you know, keep on grinding more of those particular, you know, shiny objects, as you know. So even then though, which could be also say applies to the actual remake of the entire game itself as well. So you probably get the idea. And I suppose another thing I should probably mention about this too is the fact that you remember what I said before about the fact that I'm probably not going to be picking up the Sega Game Gear, specifically the Sega Game Gear Micro specifically, because I think that's what most people seem to always complain about, that particular micro version of that particular Sega handheld. But actually I'll get to more on that later, because for now I'm as well able to concentrate, because at this point, oh boy, it just gets really tricky, especially noticeable how the fact that we need to time our jumps carefully and make sure you don't fall off, because again, if you do fall off, then you have to restart the entire mission all over again. So, but at least luckily you still managed to get yourselves the double jump ability without doubt, so that way it can make, at least it just makes you safe, assuming if you're able to try to avoid a lot of those bottomless pits as much as possible. So, oh, please tell me this is going to be the end. Yes, this is the end. Whew. Jeez, that took me a lot of tries to able to actually get this right. Even especially noticeable, in addition to getting that particular golden spatula right there, we're also going to get another one after we talk to Mermaid Man due to this particular, well, the teleportation box, as you can see right there. I think fundamentally we've only got 3 missions left.
Well, now, that's some time you've gotten.
I guess you could say I had that course licked.
I guess I owe you a reward. Take this golden spatula.
Thanks, Mermaid Man.
Although, unfortunately for those two right here, both Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, I'm afraid this will have to be the final time we're going to be seeing these two, until when we get to the forms of the ending conclusion of this Let's Play, which I'll probably should talk more about it until for later, because I'm not going to spoil things too much about this, but I'm sure most people already know of what's going to happen in Journey of Forms within the later portion of this Let's Play. So, anyway, enough about that. Oh, wait a minute, I just realized I seem to be missing one sock for Patrick, but we'll save that until whenever we're done with the some other missions to take care of. I think specifically for this point right now, we've already got about 2 more missions left, which there are one from the forms within that particular caged, you know, golden spatula, as you guys saw from since the previous part of this. And also we need to save the majority of the campers, so that way we can able to get ourselves the next golden spatula from Mrs. Puff. So, potentially speaking, that's how usually goes, basically. So either way, I suppose speaking of the forms of, oh yeah, speaking of Patrick's sock, in order to able to get this one here, we need to able to carefully line the actual bubble ball ability up, and that way it should able to actually destroy those sneakily tikis, as you can see right there. So either way though, yeah, that's as far as I can usually just try to tell you guys about that specific hint and trick. So, but either way though, everything else will be self-explanatory for the majority of the time. So, anywho, what was I trying to say? Oh yeah, because, yeah, I probably will not decide to get myself the Sega Game Gear Micro anymore. Just because, well, I feel like this is generally just a rip-off, and also same applies to that. The amount of games, library selections of games, is super small in comparison to the forms within the PlayStation Mini, as well as the forms of the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, or in this case the PC Engine Mini, and all the other stuff. And because of that, the only games I always cared about is, of course, the Sonic Game Gear games, which are Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and Sonic Chaos, which I think that's why most people seem to always recommend these two. Well, despite the fact that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 does not make it into the actual the Sega Game Gear Micro, probably because that particular game can be pretty brutal for some players out there. And same applies to Sonic Triple Trouble, because I don't know if, well, it does manage to cost about £25 in Journey forms within the UK version of Triple Trouble, but compared to the other games like Sonic Lapwith, Sonic Drift Racing, Tails Adventure, and especially noticeable with, I would say Sonic Blast, because those games are disgustingly expensive in the UK version. I'm pretty sure it's most notably because, well, usually, exception of course, Sonic Spinball is the only exception, because that game is remarkably cheap. But either way, the reason why that these games, what I usually did talk about, which there are obviously Sonic Drift Racing, aka Sonic Drift 2, if for those who lived in North America, or Japan anyway, and also same applies to Sonic Lapwith, and also Tails Adventure, and Sonic Blast, and I think oh, what's another game that I did mention since earlier ago? I think that's the only games I can think of. That those 4 games, specifically the UK version of these Game Gear Sonic titles or something, these games are disgustingly expensive, especially Sonic Blast, especially with Tails Adventure as well. Probably because it was actually kind of unheard for most gamers, or something like that. Or the reason why that Sonic Blast is actually really super expensive is probably because that game is the lamest platformer Sonic games that I've ever played on the Game Gear's handheld device. Well, luckily I still managed to get that game due to the actual compilations and stuff like that. Like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut, and especially noticeable with, of course, Sonic Mega Collection Plus in both the PS2 and, of course, the Xbox version as well, despite I've actually accidentally just purchased 2 versions of those particular stuff, basically. So I just have no idea why. Truly saying for this point right about now. Speaking of the forms of the Game Gear itself, actually, recently we've managed to get ourselves, alternatively speaking, the final handheld thing that we've actually got. Now, I would say the final handheld that we actually got, probably because we're probably not going to spend on the forms of other expensive things anytime soon. Now is, of course, the Sega Game Gear itself, which, yes, we've now finally got the actual Game Gear unit itself. Even though it might be seems a little bit redundant, probably because of how the fact that that particular handheld didn't do so well compared to its competition between Nintendo's Game Boy, because Nintendo Game Boy does manage to did it so well back in the forms of the late 1980s or something like that. Well, to be more specifically, in the late in the 90s or something like that. And well, despite the fact that in the original Game Boy it does manage to feel incredibly lacking with color, but with the actual capabilities what the Game Boy has to offer is super impressive still. But I will say is the fact that the Game Boy does manage to able to have themselves some very good library of software as far as I'm aware. Mainly with the forms of the original Tetris, Super Mario Land, and also Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins, and even especially noticeable with any other games for that as well. Even most people seem to think that Pokemon is actually becoming a lot popular in journey forms of the handheld lifespan or something like that, which is understandable for most fans out there. Well, I'm not exactly a huge Pokemon fanatic still, but at least I did have a decent time on certain Pokemon stuff. Specifically, well, I still really enjoyed the movies themselves, and especially noticeable with the forms of Poke Park and Poke Park 2, despite I need to able to actually get onto those eventually, whenever we're done with most other games basically first. So, but don't worry, it will take some time alone. Even not to mention though, is the fact that we were expecting to able to deal with the forms of Poke Park Wii for the sake of the forms of that particular Let's Play for the sake of this year though. But unfortunately I didn't get much chance to able to actually just to, excuse me, didn't get enough chance to able to do that yet. But hopefully by the time in the future though, I would able to like to. But we'll see what happens here until when it gets to at some point by the nearly towards the forms of the halfway point of 2020 itself. So, but you know, you get the idea for that point. And it looks like we actually got ourselves about 74 of those golden spatulas so far, so we're actually doing not that bad. So, but even then, we've only got about one more golden spatula left, and that's of course finding the actual lost campers, which, again, I must admit though, a semi-blind kind of routine and stuff like that, as you guys should know, this means is the fact that I might as well have a struggling time just trying to find the rest of the campers, as you guys should know. So, speaking of the actual Game Gear itself, actually, that we've now finally got in our hands, and I will say, it looks incredibly bulky, but I will say, it does manage to fit my grips super nicely. Even though despite the fact that it does have a lot of issues, well, let's talk about the positive thing about the Game Gear itself. For one thing, it has full color, which has always been a nice little pleasant surprise. And second, is the fact that the actual aesthetic about the actual handhelds, despite it was incredibly bulky compared to the forms of the Nintendo's Game Boy, but at least I can apply to that because of how the fact that I usually kind of like, well, prefer like having grips and stuff like that. Although, don't get me wrong, I still really think that the Game Boy itself does look pretty nice. But either way though, that's how it usually goes basically. So even then though, I have no idea why I try to explain things like that. Probably because of how the fact that I always try to compare some things, but sometimes it's hard to remember about these kinds of stuff sometimes, but I digress. But you know, you get the idea for that little solutions for the sake of time. Of course, one thing I should probably point things out right away, since after all that we've almost nearly at the end of June already, which is about 2 days time now until we move on to the 7th month, which appears to be July. Unfortunately though, this will have to be the last uploading schedule I'm going to be doing from now on. But then don't worry, I'll be back for this until at some point, God knows until likely in July or August, if depending on the forms of other Let's Plays I'm going to be tackling through this point. But we'll see what happens during at some point by during whenever we get onto the next world at some point throughout. So, but either way though, don't worry, it will take us a lot of time to able to actually think about it. It will take a long time to able to think about this kinds of stuff, as you guys should know. And what's nice about the forms of the actual Game Gear system that we've got, it actually comes with 6 AA batteries, which I will say that will be my only major gripe I have with that particular handheld. Now is of course let's just say a battery monster hungry, or a battery hunger kind of particular handheld, because it does contain 6 AA batteries compared to the micro version, until at some point in October that it only holds up for about 2 of those AAA batteries, which I think it's some likely improvement about that, but I will still say that I'm still gonna pass on, you know, the actual Game Gear Micro, because it looks incredibly stupid, if you should say. But I will still say, though, is the fact that the Game Boy does manage to able to do a massive, fantastical kind of stuff, as you know, which I have no idea why you're saying things like that still, probably because it's been quite a long while since I've actually done quite a few commentaries these days, but I digress. So yeah, talking of the Game Gear stuff actually, there are 3 games I managed to go with it, such as the actual thing it comes with is, well, I would say the actual Sega's Game Packs 4-in-1, which does manage to contain a virtual tennis thing and the racing game, as well as the forms of any 2 other games I was going to be thinking of, like a puzzle game or something. And I would say a football, but to be honest with you guys, I don't usually care for it too much. But the ones I cared for, as you guys should already know, is of course I managed to get the physical versions of Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, both on the Game Gear, despite the fact that we've already technically got those 2 due to the forms of the compilation games. But we're only going to be able to do that to stay able to play on the go. Plus, because of how the fact that, although you also might get these 2 games, as well as the other Game Gear games as well, on the 3DS eShop versions as well, on the Nintendo 3DS, but I don't feel like trying to be bothered able to actually just purchase those during the forms of the actual 3DS handhelds, because by this point in time, I'm still so used to with Nintendo Switch, which is the most current Nintendo consoles that we ever consider to be still playing. Especially noticeable that I've still managed to able to be playing through the remake of this game, and so far I've recently completed it. So even then though, within 100% completion itself too. So then again, I'm probably not going to discuss upon the forms of the 100% completion of this game just yet though, until when it gets to the point until likely about a few days time, because I say few days time because it will take us a lot of work in order to able to deal with like not only commentary but also trying to able to actually just split those clips as much as possible, assuming if depending on the dual die situations that I always keep on running into, such as this. And by the way, for those of you probably wondering about the fact that why'd you able to go yourselves the physical cartridge versions of Sonic 1 and 2, both on the Game Gear? Well, the thing is though, is the fact that despite I usually have a tough time going through Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but on the other hand, Sonic 1 is just super fantastic, even on the Game Gear version as a result. And of course, there's also the Master System version on that as well. Speaking of the Master System actually, and so at some point in the future, I might try to able to possibly get myself not only Sonic 1 and 2 and Sonic Chaos on both on the Master System, but also I might as well consider trying to get myself Sega Mega Drive Master System Converter, which actually allows me to able to play some backwards compatibility with the, of course, Master System games onto the Mega Drive itself, which, sure, it's like super handy and everything, especially noticeable how the fact that how cool that is, even though despite the fact that it didn't do so well sales-wise, sadly. But either way though, I'm guessing it's probably because of how the fact that due to the capability issues or something like that, so. But you know, you get the idea for that little topic I was going to be on about, and yeah, I just have no idea why I just managed to backtrack from here. But regardless of everything else though, I'm usually just trying to able to actually look for the next song covers about to be found around here, but then we still need to able to actually find the final 2 of those the Lost Campers, which we'll hopefully try to able to actually complete this world as much as possible. But of course, as you can tell from the actual time length, there's going to be something like, can be something I really can't speak today for this point, guys. I really am. But either way, though, does that take me all the way back? Yeah, it does take me all the way back. So even then, we'll just try this again, and hopefully we would be able to actually not only just trying to grab even more shiny objects, but also, you know, just trying to figure out what the actual correct pathway that leads us to, well, Patrick's Sock, basically. So either way, though, because chances are, I just have no idea why I just keep on, like, having some dual die situations like these did. But anyways, I suppose something's worth mentioning too is the fact that, actually, to be honest with you guys, there's not much else I can talk about apart from the fact that, well, we did recently get ourselves the actual Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 on a Game Gear, so that way I can able to play on the go. And whilst playing on the TV, just managed to able to get the best opportunities to get the best quality to doing those Let's Plays like these, especially with how the compilation games come in. Especially noticeable until at some point that we might, let me know in the comments below if actually kind of think about it though, is the fact that YouTube has sometimes screwed me up all over again. Well, nothing major, but it's just it's kind of bothering me a little bit, especially how uploading the actual video option is now entirely new and stuff like that, which it might be fine for first time viewing on it, but most of the time I just have no idea why. I just keep on just like to, well, there goes my opportunities there, so even then we'll try that again. So, but either way though, if you're probably wondering why the actual thing itself is usually just smashed to pause like that, but it's probably because I have to look it up to see what the Patrick Sock is located. So you know with this bit right here, well, double jump onto that particular bouncy leaf right here. And that way you should not only get the next few set of those shiny objects, but also the next and probably the final Patrick Sock. So that pretty much takes care of the forms of the Patrick Socks, you know, collectathon in terms of this particular world itself. And eventually at this point, whenever we move on to the final two worlds specifically, which there are the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard as well as SpongeBob's Dream, which we'll get to those at some point by during another few days of summer, but also because of how the fact that we've only got about 8 pairs of socks left, so hopefully we should able to get enough opportunities to able to actually just to collect them all in time. But we'll definitely see what happens whenever the time usually decides to able to come about and all that stuff. So, anywho. So anyways, let's switch over to Patrick again so we can able to expect to double check on things. But then again, if I get confused or lost in that particular part itself like that, then I can always assuming I can able to look it up and to see if what things itself I was missing. So as a result, yeah. As far as you guys should already know, is the fact that I'm not a big fan of, you know, I'm not a big fan of this Kelp Forest particular world. Yeah, let me just go ahead and just skip this little dialogue right here. So we can expect we can able to actually just to find, you know, the final 2 campers. And then once we find the final 2 of those campers, then we can talk to Mrs. Puff. And then hopefully we should be able to be completely done with the forms of Kelp Forest itself. And then thankfully I don't have to touch that world ever again. Well, at least I generally already did, since in the remake version of this game, like specifically on the PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch version, or to be more accurate, the PlayStation 4 version as what the actual version I was playing through first. You know, just like the forms of the majority of the Sonic games, like Sonic Mania / Sonic Mania Plus, and also Sonic Forces, and recently Team Sonic Racing, which, kind of think about it, I'm pretty sure it definitely needs to get back into this and join at some point until likely on November, which it might does take a long time to able to actually get back into that. Even though despite the fact, however, though, is the fact that the amount of views we've got for Team Sonic Racing wasn't nearly as high as the forms of how it does it in the previous 2 Sumo Digital Sonic Racing games, which is of course the original Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, and also same applies to All-Stars Racing Transforms, because those games are by far the most superior of the bunch. Well, I would say my superior ones out of the bunch, however though, it will probably be, well, I would say the original game, probably due to for my nostalgia reasons, and also you know, All-Stars Racing transformed because they actually did something new to the table and stuff like that. And plus, the amount of tracks they have, despite with the actual Graffiti City, which I'm still not a big fan of that particular level, but at least it does manage to able to actually entertain me when it comes to the forms of visual variety and all the other jazz. But again, I might be biased when it comes to the forms of certain parts like that, so... But you know, you get the idea for that solution right here. So anyways, let's keep on bouncing onto those little bouncy brown leaves before we're able to actually keep on searching for anything. But of course, there's not much else we can look for apart from the fact that we still need able to actually just to hunt down those, you know, the actual remaining campers and stuff like that. So, but even then, still, it might actually take me a lot of time to able to actually just to figure out where in the world am I supposed to be doing. So yeah, another thing I was want to point out right away is the fact that, well, ever since whenever I said this before, that I probably should able to pass, you know, the Sega Game Gear Micro. It's also because it's super expensive as well. If you're able to try and purchase 4 more variations of that particular handheld thing itself, which I was like, I'm not bothered. I kind of prefer just like getting a Game Gear on its own. But despite that, however, though, there are some a little bit of an issue quirky things in terms of the condition. Well, luckily the sound itself doesn't go off, unless if the actual sound itself just managed to turn off all by itself, then I'm also able to fetch some compactor. Well, if you know exactly what that particular mod chip was supposed to be like, it's like you can able to get yourselves a fixed up, you know, just a fixed up sound box with the compactor, or compactor. I think that's what the actual pronunciation with that particular mod chip is for. But either way though, we'll see what happens during the future days and beyond. And also same applies to those items that I've managed to got. Well, I basically just ordered myself the Sonic the Hedgehog movie poster, because unlike whenever I went to the cinema and stuff like that back in February, it does not come with one. So instead, I managed to able to actually pick up the forms of the actual spare poster from eBay and able to select the A4 type paper, or the poster I should say, so that way it just makes things a little bit nicer in terms of the fonts of that particular size. So, but even then, at least I'm very glad that I've managed to able to actually just have that, at least for the sake of the forms of putting some posters all over the room and stuff like that, even though despite the fact that we've almost got to fill up the entire wall of posters. Like specifically, I still have some old posters, like the Super Mario Galaxy 2 poster, as well as that particular nice artwork of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep especially, and especially to top it all off is the fact that with, well, some movie posters in there too. Like, for instance, that we still got is Ralph Breaks the Internet, and also the Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame especially as well, and also the ones in Frozen 2, and also still applies to the forms of, what else? The My Little Pony The Movie 2017 poster that I still managed to got since 2017, despite with the forms of the actual late. I would say it's like a 5 days late for able to actually seeing it on the big screen, for what I've seen it since about, oh jeez, it's been about almost 3 years ago since I've actually last time I've seen it. But I digress. So anyways, let's go ahead and sneak bypass this enemy here and destroy him in the process, and we should able to find the 5th camper. Now we need to find the last camper, which I have no idea where that thing was supposed to be at, but we'll see what happens if we manage to keep on just searching around all over the place in terms of Kelp Forest itself. Even then though, that we almost done with the forms of Kelp Forest, so trust me, we almost done with this point, folks. So yeah, we are getting there. So I think fundamentally speaking, it's actually going to be on, let's just say, in the beginning portion of the Kelp Forest itself. So hopefully we should be able to find the last camper, and we should be able to actually conclude Kelp Forest, because let me tell you, I'm just getting a little bit bored of this world. Easily one of the weakest worlds in the game. Despite there are some cool references here and there, like even then the actual magic conch shell doesn't seem to help you at all. And yeah, talking of which actually, speaking of Kelp Forest itself, yes, I did sort of mention about this briefly, is the fact that the actual Kelp Forest was first located on the episode called Club SpongeBob. So, yeah, I was totally right after all, and I did not notice the leaves itself is managed able to won't last for long. Oh gee, I did not even notice that, but we can able to find a way back, assuming if we can able to actually find the correct paths to go to. But, again, we'll see what happens there. And speaking of the actual shiny objects, we almost there to 4,000, so that way we can able to actually spend on, you know, just a couple of more of those shiny objects. But then again, there was actually that one particular unique spot that I would like to show you guys about the fact that with the actual grinding with those shiny objects, as I like to show you for this point. But we'll save that until for later, but not now though, because even then that we still managed to focusing on, you know, for this particular bleak world like this. But either way though, still, that's just how it is for me. And potentially speaking for this point, this will actually be the true definition of the final time trying to able to play as Patrick in this game, because by the sake of time until we move on to the final 2 worlds, that it might actually be something more accurately that we're going to be switching over to SpongeBob and Sandy, not Patrick. But either way though, we'll talk more about those until whenever we get on to the final 2 worlds of the game. Well, to be more specifically, the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard, as well as, you know, SpongeBob's Dream. But then again, I'm going for these worlds in a chronological order, so just in case I don't want to let you guys get confused of the forms of what world order I was about to be able to go into. So, and yeah, I apologize for able to accidentally toss the watermelon at Mrs. Puff, probably because the actual the hand cursor just managed to showed up for almost like nothing else, assuming if we're able to actually just try to cope with certain things like that. But either way, I digress. Yeah, unfortunately for Patrick though, is the fact that you can't able to deal with the forms of those inflatable enemies, as you can see right there, but only SpongeBob can. I know there's actually another way you can able to attack these 3 trios of those enemies from over there, by simply able to actually press the triangle button with SpongeBob and stuff, but I've never actually tested it for myself, probably because, well, I'm pretty much used to with the forms of the actual spin attack as normal. So anyway, let's go ahead and ground pound this switch, and that way we should able to actually activate some more beanstalks or some vines, whatever, and then we should be able to actually make our way to not only the next set of few platforms. I was off by 1, by able to reach for about 4,000 of those shiny objects, but hopefully we'll grab some more later down the road, especially noticeable that we've actually activated another switch, so that way it will able to actually extend the actual height of the actual vine itself, and we've now reached to 4,000 of those shiny objects, so that way we can able to spend on these during at some point throughout the whole thing. And, well, we found the final camper, so even then though, let's just go ahead and, sadly I just managed to commit suicide from this point right there. But I don't think we can able to get the golden spatula of Patrick, so speaking of such, we have to switch over to SpongeBob, and then we can able to get the golden spatula, and once we're done with that, then we'll probably guarantee to leave this world for good.
SpongeBob, there you are! Thanks to you, all the campers have safely returned.
No problem, Mrs. Puff. Any self-respecting sponge would gladly help. And it was actually fun exploring the Kelp Forest.
You're not so bad when you aren't behind a wheel, SpongeBob. Thanks again.
Always glad to lend a hand, Mrs. Puff.
I found this golden spatula the other day. Why don't you take it? You've definitely earned it.
Wow, Mrs. Puff. I'll cherish it always.
Alright, let's go ahead and get this last golden spatula in Kelp Forest, and truth be told, since we've now reached up to 75 of those golden spatulas as it is, I think simply to say it's best to probably leave this place, because let me tell you, this world is pretty underwhelming, probably because of how the fact that, well, it is kind of cool to able to actually explore around on Kelp Forest, like, you know, trying to referencing, you know, the actual TV show especially. But however, I will have to admit though, it's almost like a maze kind of level. Like, some people usually just despise this particular level so much just because you just get confused and lost in these places, and also because of how the fact that, well, you guys should probably already know at this point in time. So anyways, the Kelp Forest world is now fully completed, which is about time, and we've only got about 2 more worlds left, including the forms of the grand finale portion as well, but we'll save that until likely for the next few days. So join me next time on Let's Play SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, is that we are moving on to Flying Dutchman's Graveyard, so I'll see you guys soon. Later, fellas.